Kia ora koto. Thank you all for joining WSP on our last Tech Week session today. A big thanks to those who participated, and we hope that you all had fun and learnt a lot too. So my name's Chao Nagayan. I'm the Client Director for WSP's new digital team, and will be facilitating from Christchurch this afternoon. A bit about myself, I'm new to New Zealand, decided to go and live in the big city down south in Christchurch. I love dinosaurs and also space travel. So for today's discussion panel, we have a few of our WSP graduates sharing their views and insights into the future of New Zealand. Ever wondered what the future would look like? So I was watching Back to the Future 2 on Sunday, and I'm sure many of you were also. It made me really think, with the acceleration of and adoption of technology, how will this change the way we live and interact with each other in the future? Will the future really have hoverboards? Everyday drone delivery? How will blockchain support supply chain issues? What will an NZ Inc. digital twin really look like? What about NFTs and the metaverse? Lots of exciting technologies and opportunities to discuss today. So as I go around and we introduce ourselves, can you please click and vote for your favorite topic so that we can start the session with this topic? Over to you, Jess.
Thanks, Chow. Tēnā koutou katoa. Ko Aotearoa te kāinga noho. Ko WSP aho I mahi ana. Ko Jess Holland aho. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Hey everyone, I'm Jess and I'm a graduate GIS analyst in the Christchurch office for WSP. I sit in the water team, so mostly my work focuses around the three waters. However, I have been able to have some experience in the digital twin side as well. I really like how GIS you get to do lots of problem solving and the communication side that comes with it, taking data and actually giving it value for clients. Outside of work, I love sports. At the moment, I'm focusing on cheerleading, so I coach two youth teams and compete in a team myself. So it adds up to being quite a busy week. On to you, Alice.
Tēnā koe, Jess. Kia ora mai tātou, ko maua te maunga, ko te awanui te awa, ko mā tātua te waka, ko Ngāti Rangi rawa, ko Ngāti Rangi nui o ku iwi, ko Ngāti Hangarau tōku hapu, ko Hangarau rawa, ko Rangi Wai o ku marae. No hakatere aho ki te whanganui a tāra aho I noho ana, hei wai pūkaha aho me WSP, ko Elise Lasa tōku ingoa. Nō reira, tēnā tātou katoa. Kia ora, my name is Elise. I'm a graduate water engineer here at WSP. I whakapapa Māori to the Tauranga Moana area, Ngāti Rangi and Ngāti Ranginui through my mum, and whakapapa to Ireland, tracing back through my dad's whakapapa to the Mclassett clan. I grew up in Ashburton, now based in Te Whanganui at Tara Wellington, and really enjoying my job here at WSP, involved kind of like Jess within the three water space, in the water asset space. So that's how I use technology day to day. And yeah, just really appreciate you all tuning in. Ngā mihi nui kia koutou katoa. Tēnā koe, Isaac.
Tēnā koe, Elise. Tēnei te mihi kia koutou katoa, ko Isaac tōku ingoa, ko maunga pohatu, ko matawhāoranga maunga, ko rangitau ki te awa, ko rangi po te wehinga o te tona, ko roto i te rotoma me roto ihu ngā moana, ko mātātua ko te aroa te waka, ko mātātua ko tapuai haruru ngā marae, ko te iruera ko tamatea tuka tahi kāwiti, ngā hapu, ko Ngāti Manoa, ko Ngai Tūhoi, ko Ngāti Puke o ngā iwi. Ko Richard tōku pāpa, ko Tona tōku māma, ko Isaac Kara tōku ingoa, no Kapiti I ahau, I te puake me noho ana au. Ki Kapiti, he kaitohu maramatanga pakahi I ahau, no reira tēnā koutou, tēnā rā tātou katoa. Kia ora I tā whānau, ko Isaac tōku ingoa. I grew up in Kapiti. I'm from a big family up there in Te Whanganui Atara, in the region of Wellington. I have just moved to WSP. It's my third week in, and I'm working as a advisor in business intelligence, and I've just come from Statistics New Zealand, where I was working as a statistical data analyst. I'm into a lot of things outside of work, including sports is a big thing for me, and then also hip hop dance, which I've done since I was a kid. That's me. Tēnā koe tāne. Kia ora.
Thank you, everyone. So votes are in. We will start with accessibility to technology. Please feel free to write any questions you have in the meeting chat, and we will come to those when we have some time. So Pandemic-related lockdowns have highlighted the digital divide in New Zealand, with households across the country not having access to computers or devices or even the internet or skills to utilise them. So I think a question for you, Isaac. Why is it important to ensure technology is accessible to everyone?
Kia ora, mō tō pātai. Thank you for your question. I think for me personally, I've seen when it comes to accessibility of technology, I refer back to maybe um, Māori and the census that took place. I think that's a really good example of a place where Māori didn't have, I guess, the accessibility that maybe everybody would in New Zealand, or a lot of Māori around Aotearoa didn't have that accessibility. With that, I believe that there was a massive gap in the census where, as we all know, a lot of Māori didn't get placed into that category of being a New Zealander. I think that opened up a massive conversation and kind of was quite an eye opener of well, there's actually people that don't have the same luxuries as us in Aotearoa. There's some people that don't have running water. There's some people that don't have technology or even internet in their house. Um, so with that, I think it's quite a that was also a massive eye opener, I think, to government and non-government around Aotearoa to be able to realise that not every place looks the same. Um, yeah, so I think when it comes to accessibility and the importance of it, I think realizing those factors and then acting off, okay, well, if there's this issue, where can we see change? And I think that's the question I guess I'd ask back to government and back to people in the for the future of New Zealand. How can we go about maybe looking into finding ways to make that accessible in those maybe towns or those places where technology isn't available, or where those places where not only Maori, Pasifika, and people of other races around New Zealand don't have that accessibility. Hi, that's me. Kia
Thanks,
ora.
Isaac. And Tane, do you want to introduce yourself? Apologies, that was my fault.
I thought I managed to sneak away from that one.
I know.
Kia ora koutou. Ko maunga poatu te maunga, ko waikare moana te awa, ko te uruwera te ngahere, ko tūhoi rawa ko Ngāti Whare tōku iwi, no ōtautahi e noho ana, ko Tāne Taipa tōku ingoa. Kia ora everybody, my name is Tāne or Tāne, whichever you prefer, and I live in Christchurch. I studied a Bachelor of Commerce, majoring in Information Systems and Human Resource Management, down here in Canterbury. And my role at WSP is a digital advisor. So in a nutshell, we help clients along their digital transformation journey. I do some work outside of WSP as well for the Māori Tech Association. And then outside of mahi, I find myself spending a lot of time with whānau and friends and playing sports. I like basketball, and I've recently joined a kickboxing gym to help stay in shape too. Really excited to be here today and looking forward to sharing my thoughts and experiences with everyone. Kia ora.
Thanks, Tane. I'll
No,
pose the same question to you then. Why do you think it is important to ensure technology is accessible to everyone?
yeah, good. That's a great question. I think one of the biggest things is around, we know with technology, we know how accessible things like Google make information and education. And if there are people who don't have access to technology or the devices to access those platforms, then they're really missing out on these great opportunities, not only education, but also job opportunities. I know that if I didn't have a laptop or a phone growing up, I wouldn't have got my first job, for example. I wouldn't have landed into the job that I've got with the MTA, and I certainly wouldn't be here at WSP if I didn't have access to what I do. But touching on sort of what Isaac was saying before about how we can make it more accessible, I've seen efforts, like scattered efforts from non-government organisations, like a colleague of mine, Lee Timu. I know that he was doing some mahi where he basically just, it was actually all within the Māori tech community. People reached out and asked who's got devices that they can help, because there's this community here that really needs access. And so they partnered with other businesses. One of the telcos, I can't remember which telco it was, But yeah, they partnered with some other organisations to help make that happen. But I think that sort of effort needs to happen on a bigger scale, perhaps from government or something like that. Yeah, and we can't just rely on other people to do this for us. Oh, sorry, smaller organisations to do it for us. I think the government has some responsibility there too.
Thanks there, Tane. What can we or the government do more to improve this issue going forward?
I'd love to just quickly jump in here and just go my whakaaro on that. I think one, I spoke briefly on this in a different presentation for Tech Week earlier today, and around the next steps, I guess, for people wanting to be able to have these discussions and have these open conversations around these sort of things. I think one big thing is learning, learning from people that have the understanding and have the capability to teach, and humbling ourselves in that way to be able to come into a place where we can come to learn and come to ask those questions and actually listen to the responses that are being given. I think building relationship with either iwi, Māori, or locals in the regions can be a way of um, learning about maybe some of the places that actually don't have that kind of accessibility, learning about those people that don't have the same, I guess, advantages or things that may be a bit more struggling that us as tangata don't always understand. So I think coming into a place where we can learn and listen from those people, from those kaumātua, from whoever it is that we're going to for knowledge for that mātauranga, and coming to a place where we then are ready to, okay, we've heard the issues, we've learned about the issues. Now, how can we go about fixing that? Yeah, that's my whakaaro.
Thanks, Isaac. I think we'll move on to the next topic, so digital communication. I think one for you, Jess. What technologies do you think will dramatically change the way we communicate as a society?
Thanks, Chow. So it's a really fun question. I feel like historically, looking back, had kind of a lot of physical printed information, whether flyers, newspapers, or in our work we do lots of reports. I think we're currently shifting to be more online, but still interacting through a screen. Like it might be, I do a lot of online interactive maps, doing some sort of web apps, but I think to the future, it might really explore into the AR and VR space. So be able to interact with the virtual environment around you. I think that's probably be some of the most exciting aspects as that becomes more widespread. So obviously today with Oculus Rift and gaming, it's starting to get there, but it's still limited. You have to have the headset or kind of the right software to do it, which can limit some of the public's interaction. As we go to the future, I think it'll be more and more popular, and that would be a good way that we can engage with communities as well, rather than having to go through a screen, which for some people can still be a challenging way to see things, especially if it's let's showcase a new 3D building model. Looking on a screen, some people might not be able to get that, whereas if you could walk around a model, you'd have a much better understanding. So that's one area I think we're going to really boost in.
And do you think these changes will impact your work in the future as well and project delivery?
I think so, yes. I'm already seeing a shift towards digital delivery, on the screen based applications. However, I know that some projects that have used AR/VR to huge success, and the clients have really enjoyed how it increases the ability for co-design. So you can sit down with someone with, say, a wastewater pump station that you've designed, and walk through with the operators. You can test out, does it meet certain health and safety compliances? If you identify something that's a potential issue in the design, you can change it right then and there with the client. I think that'll have great way to improve the efficiency of our designs, which as people tend to get more time poor, as all this more information comes at us, I think will be a really good bonus.
Yeah, that's a really good point, actually. The ability for people to share information and design together remotely, I think brings a lot of opportunities as well. That's, yeah, really great point, Jess. I think one for Elise. what are some of the challenges or concerns with digital communication?
Yeah, absolutely. I think Jess actually just touched on it. A big challenge that I see is how we are all getting time for the reliance that we have on this digital communication space. In terms of, say, for example, storytelling. If we rely solely on what's out there in the digital world, so Googling stuff and things like that, we may miss the kōrero around the kōrero of an area of the stories within the kaumātua. We'll miss all that if we just focus solely on digital communication and what's online. So I think it's really important that we create these either multifaceted ways of grasping our information, or we're just really cognizant that we can't just rely on the digital space. So it may seem a bit contradictory in being in Tech Week, but I think it is really important to bring up in that sense. Also around this accessibility kōrero that Tane and Isaac touched on earlier as well, that for me is a big challenge too with digital communication. We need to be mindful that even for likes of a video, a lot of our, say, hearing impaired whānau may not be able to access that. So in the future, what I would love to see, with being the future of New Zealand, webinar is making sure that subtitles and things like that on videos are the norm and things like that. So in the future, those are the challenges I think that we're going to have, that we have at the moment, and it's also something that we'll be facing in the future too.
Right, thank you, Elise. We've got a question in. Thanks, Oliver. How do we balance the right for free speech versus censorship? Large new media tech companies seem to have a lot of control these days. Good question.
I'd say that is a really good question. Definitely not an easy one to answer, as we've seen like recently with the COVID-19 pandemic and that battle between like misinformation and obviously like the truth coming out. I think part of it is going to be having to hold like large media companies accountable. There are always smaller companies that are, presenting their views, but with the way technology is, it's very easy for those to get drowned out. You jump down a few bits on the search page and no one's going to click that far. Everyone likes like instantaneous kind of feedback. I think it's definitely something we're going to have to look at long term. I don't have like an answer other than that, something that we really need to be aware of and consider. Also, as people creating content on the digital space, we need to be aware of what we're putting out there. I think it's another big aspect, and the ethical implications of things that we may share, particularly like around data. If we're sharing data or presenting like I do a map, how could someone else take this and use it for their own benefit? Which is like kind of similar to the free speech. Like I could in theory put out what I want, especially if I own it, but how someone else interprets that, as someone needs to be aware of that. And that's an area I think digital like education could grow in.
Yeah. Another question. So what are some ways we can democratize data? Great session earlier, by the way, Isaac. What are some of the ways we can democratize data?
One thing that immediately jumps to my mind is, and I'm not an expert in the area, but technology such as blockchain, where there's no one central controller over the network. So versus a central thing like if you stored something on a Google database, Google owns that data. If you store something on a blockchain, it's not owned by one central person. It's owned by whoever is running computers on that network. So it could be millions of people who own that data. No one could, well, not own the data. Essentially, no one owns the data in that case. But yeah, that's one thing that does jump to my mind immediately. I don't know if anyone wants to touch on that or add something else to there.
Let's move on then. Okay, so the metaverse is a term often used to describe a virtual world where we can work and play in, interacting through VR tools. Back to you, Tane. Do you have any concerns with this idea?
Well, the first concern is I think the way that some people sell this idea of the metaverse is a bit over the top. Like, well, at least my understanding, again, not an expert, but my understanding of it is it's just a virtual world where people can work and play. Like, I can put on a VR headset and join one particular world in the metaverse and interact with people there. It's not this. Yeah, a lot of people hype it up to be this awesome, great, amazing thing, and it might be. It could be completely proven wrong, but I just see it as another way for us to interact in the digital world, which is I think there are definitely pros to that. Like, for example, if I was working from home and instead of jumping onto a Teams meeting like normal, if I could chuck on a headset and all of a sudden I'm now in a meeting room with my colleagues who are sitting around me, I can look across the table and see someone, or look to my left and see someone there. There's something different about that versus seeing someone's image on a flat 2D screen. But yeah. I suppose another concern around the metaverse is if it does become this thing where we spend so much time working and playing, what are the well-being concerns of that? Like if well, there's already concerns around well-being of screen time, but if we're spending so much time in this world, this digital world that's even more immersive than what we're already used to, could that be bad? Could that lead to some health concerns going forward? Likely, my guess or my answer would be probably, but we'll have to wait and see, I guess, how that all plays out.
Yeah, very true. I'm really interested in the virtual world, to be honest. Sometimes it's difficult to live in the real world. But moving on, diversity in tech and engineering. In recent studies in New Zealand technology industry, it states that 26% of the technology workforce are women, 4% identify as Maori, and 2.8% identify as Pacifica. So one for you, Elise. What does a diverse workforce mean to you?
Yeah, I suppose diversity is such a broad kind of realm. There are so many layers to it. You've mentioned some really powerful stats there, but it's also, yeah, the age, gender, sex, culture, ethnicity, etc., etc. So my answer to this is definitely more about what we can do to cast our net like a bit wider to learn more. So diversity workforce looks to me, say if I was in a workforce and I was like, this is great, like it's really diverse, it's exciting, because I think those two words really go hand in hand. And that looks like to me, we're all getting the opportunity and the support and the empowerment to be who we are, not leave ourselves at the door. A lot of the work in my space is through, or my personal time is through a podcast titled Māori in Engineering. And the reason why I bring this up is because it's really, I've learned throughout time when I interview Māori within the engineering world, very like to the point name, that use of technology to story tell is so powerful, and we all have our own story. And I'm not going to answer this of what does a diverse workforce look like, but how can we probably foster that a little bit more within our own workplaces is we can share our stories, we can cast our net wider to understand who is beside us so we can learn more, because we don't know what we don't know in that sense as well.
Yeah, I really like that, the idea of leveraging technology to share stories. That's a really good point. Isaac, what can organizations do to encourage a more diverse workforce into the future?
I think organizations at the moment are mostly all around Aotearoa starting to take a new approach to things. I think, especially if you look into the space of Te Ao Māori being implemented around New Zealand again, and the big, I guess, push for it and need for it, a lot of organizations are starting to realize how important that actually is. I think to see more diversity, or what that could look like, I think organizations will need to start to look really into, I guess, things like the onboarding processes, and how that can be relatable or a bit more reliable to a bit of a more of a broad scope of culture and diversity and people of a diverse background. I know I've been through many different organizations and had my own experiences with all, but I think It's so important even for managers or people that are taking people on to look into even the contracts and the mahi that people of diversity are doing, and looking into, okay, well, I've got this person who is from a diverse background, who has these skills in this area, whether that be in Māori, whether that be Pasifika or a different culture, whether that be from someone who is older or younger, whatever diversity that may look like, having a look at, okay, I've got this person with this skill set. How am I going to make them feel respected by helping them to use those skills? And I think a lot of the time, organizations can have people working on completely different roles, doing completely different things, but not having anything in their contract about it. And I think it's so important for organizations to really look down into the deep parts of the organization, like contracts, like the things that a lot of people will tend to say, oh, you just got to sign these things, and look through it and make sure you want to do this. But I think it's so important these days for organizations to actually look in and be like, no, look, if we've got someone that has this capability or has this skill set, we're actually going to respect them enough to honor that, and honor that time and that mahi that they're doing, because no matter what, I 100% believe with all my heart that no matter what the skill is, whether it's a digital skill, even in the digital world, or if it's a cultural skill, that it should be put on the same kind of pedestal. It should be an equal skill set, not that one is better than the other, because that's what we're going to need to, I guess, move forward with Aotearoa in the
Yeah,
future.
yeah,
Yeah.
definitely agree with you there, Isaac. And I think it's really responsibility both of organisations and us as individuals as well
Mm,
to make that step
mm,
change.
yeah.
What a question for you, Alice. What can individuals do to encourage a more diverse workforce in tech moving forward?
Yeah, absolutely. Just want to say really tautoko your answer there, Isaac. I think it's really crucial that we do recognize that and we do have that respect. And also not, how can I put this? Say someone does come from a diverse background, that is a part of them. And they've also got other layers to them as well, within what's brought them to that job. So individuals, what we can do to encourage more is going back to the art of storytelling, understanding the people around us, learning what they have to say, respecting what they have to say. And I think when we do that, we empower people to be who they want to be and who they are, and to again not leave ourselves at the door when we enter this workforce.
Right. So being open to new ideas is probably key to that as well. We've got a great question from the audience as well, very related to this topic. So New Zealand continues to have a considerable tech talent shortage in many sectors. What do some of you think is the risk as we recover from COVID of people like you or your university grad colleagues heading overseas? Any thoughts on what you or your peers need to stay longer in New Zealand?
I'll say this is, I feel like, quite topical. We had a catch up in the Christchurch office last week about this very subject, specifically around people staying within WSP, but I believe it can be extrapolated to the whole of New Zealand, and it's a very valid point. I know myself and lots of my peers are excited about the finally having the option to do our OE. We've been stuck in the country for the past couple years, and I feel like growing up, everyone or most people idolize this OE experience, and now we're finally getting the chance to do it. The risk of that is there's going to be like actually a hole in the workforce of people of our age and skill level, which, whilst we might not have all the technical experience for grunt work, we can be quite good, and it's quite an easy way to quickly build up those skills. However, once someone's done that and they start becoming efficient, it's a right pain to lose them and have to train everyone up again. We did also discuss what can we do to like stay in New Zealand, and we couldn't really come up with any great answers. Most of us all said like we love New Zealand. The idea of going overseas and coming back to raise a family really appeals, but there is this part of what lots of people see as Kiwi culture that we haven't experienced yet, and there isn't really anything comparable within New Zealand that we can do. I know within WSP there's been some pushes for like into office sort of secondment, so you can do short-term relocations to get that aspect, try out different areas around the country, gain some experience that way. But I still think it's an issue that New Zealand is going to have around the board. But as I said, we want to come back. That shows that New Zealand's like a positive place. So people from overseas will probably be like, I've been stuck in my country for a long time. I want to go somewhere else. And we can hopefully advertise New Zealand as that place to be. And then that can also help improve, going back to that diverse workforce, the range of people and experiences that we have in the industry, and might bring new skills that what we've learned in New Zealand, we like through the education system that we don't have yet.
Yeah.
Anyone else
Okay.
any
Yeah,
further
yeah.
further
I'd love to
ideas how to
just
stick around?
I'd love to just make a quick comment on it. I think personally as well, vision is so big and important. I think a lot of people take vision for granted these days, especially within organizations. But I think aligning your vision to the future of the way Aotearoa is going, and aligning it to the way it is starting to push for nuances and new experiences with New Zealand, I think is so important. I think living out that vision and showing that through your teams, through your kaimahi, through the work you do is such an important for me personally. When I was looking for my next role, I chose WSP to re- mainly because I had seen the vision, could see it within the way they placed their own, I guess, whakaaro around things, the way they um, showed through their projects and through their work, but also through even their management style, their vision, and that it was in a way to build towards the future of Aotearoa. And so I think that's also a massive thing for people to realize is that young people are very future thinking. You know, they're going to look to the forward, and if they can see that whakaaro, if they can see that vision in your organization from the outgo, from what you're saying, from what you're doing, it's going to be very clear to them. So I think personally, when I was looking at whether I go overseas or whether I stay here, that was one thing that was big for me was vision. Mm.
I suppose I'll have a small nugget to tag on to what Jess and Isaac have said. Totally agree with everything there too. At the end of your question, Mark, you've said any thoughts on what you or your peers need to stay longer in NZ? Not necessarily to stay longer in NZ, but I think if what would attract someone who's wanting to get overseas to an organization is if their organization provided opportunities for them to go overseas and travel. I understand not every organization in New Zealand has international offices, but I suppose for those organizations, it could look like accommodating to maybe if they want to go overseas for 3 months, giving them that 3 months off work to go and do that, and letting them know that they'll still have a job when they come back. Things like that would really, I suppose, encourage workers to the organization.
Yeah, good point, Tane. I hope you see that in WSP. There's lots
Yeah,
of
we've got a
opportunity.
few offices around the world, so
Fantastic. And I think, I mean, we're coming to kind of the last 9 minutes. So I just wanted to broaden the discussion a little bit more, guys, around. So where do you see New Zealand in 10 years' time? What do you want your New Zealand to be in 10 years' time?
I'll have a crack.
Yeah.
I would love to see New Zealand in years' time to still kind of, going forward by looking back. Ka haere whakatoa miri te haere whakamoa. So, walking into the future with our eyes fixed on our past, honouring what we have had. Someone's just waiting in the lobby, sorry. What's been the history that we have in this country, honouring that as we go forward, not just looking directly forward. Not that's not really a tangible answer, but that is something that I think we can all do and think about as we all move into the future.
So I'd like to add in my kind of 2 cents. I'd like to see an improved like blend of the digital and physical worlds for like addressing some of those accessibility issues so more people have options to join like the digital conversation, but also recognizing that we do live in a physical world and we have all this technology and it can be amazing, but we still need to take a step back and make sure we're living the physical life as well. So having these options to maybe improve it, but still being like, not spending your entire time in the metaverse, understand that we live in New Zealand. New Zealand's a fantastic place. We should get out and enjoy that as well. And some of those discussions, you can't beat having them in person. You can't beat going there physically and being aware of that, but still providing these digital options to improve accessibility.
Isaac or Tane, do you want to?
Yeah, I can jump on it. My future, what I'd like to see in the future of NZ, I think one of my goals or one of the things I'd love to see is Māori place names. Um, and the pronunciation of them. I know that's a big whakaaro and there's a big topic there. There's a lot of different arguments and perspectives there. Personally, I'd love to see in the future that it's looked at in a bit of a way as it's not looked at weird to say taupo. It's not looked at as weird to say Rotorua or to pronounce those names in the way that they were made to be made pronounced. Um, I think at the moment there is a massive change, obviously, in Te Ao Māori and in New Zealand. Um, but that would be in the future if I came to 10 years and when my kids are running around and being able to, I guess, say that without being looked at differently or funny because they're being a try hard as it might be said, but as oh wow that's cool you've raised them, that's how I'd know I'm happy in 10 years. That's just one of my whakaaro ideas of what I'd love.
So jumping on Isaac's point and bringing that into digital space, having greater software that can deal with like macrons in place names and words. For example, I know I've had issues with some software that I've used in the file path name. It's got a location that's spelt with a macron, and you wonder why can't I open my file? What's going on? And then you realize it's because it's got a macron in the name, and that's kind of like really disappointing to see still. Like, I understand why from a digital side, but it would be nice if in the future we could address these issues and it's not something we have to be concerned about and we can spell things with the macrons in that way.
100% agree with all of that. That's awesome. When I think about the future of New Zealand, one thing that jumps to mind, there's heaps of things that I'd love to see happen, but one of the first things that jumps out to me is I want to see more cool tech like VR being used in education. Like, not all kids want to read a book, and there are other ways to teach things. Like, if we're learning about the history of New Zealand through a book, some people that works for them, some people it doesn't. If they could chuck on a headset and they can see how things used to be, or they can live through an experience, it can be a lot more engaging, especially for younger students who, I don't know, speaking from my experience, I didn't really like reading all that much growing up. So something like VR, I always preferred to watch movies with subtitles instead of reading a book for my homework, things like that, which I just found it much more engaging.
Great. Any more questions from the audience? No, nothing at this point. Do one of you kind of want to summarize the session we've had today? I think we have had a great conversation, and there's lots I've learned. And I think it would be great if one of you could summarize the discussion. Anyone? You're on mute, Tana, if you're talking.
I'm on mute. Okay. A few of the topics that we talked about, is you guys probably seen them in the poll as well, but just to reiterate, so some of them were around diversity in tech and engineering and why that is an important topic. Elise was talking about what a diverse workforce means to her. We also discussed digital communication and issues with accessibility. As part of that discussion, we touched on the metaverse, and I shared some slightly jagged thoughts around my concerns on that. But hopefully some of that was understandable. And we also, we didn't touch on smart healthcare, but just at the end there, some of us shared our vision for New Zealand in the next 10 years, which is, some of these discussions are really, really big, and you can't unpack them in a short session like this. But it's been really good hearing everyone's thoughts and seeing these questions come through and getting some engagement from the audience. So thanks everybody for joining.
Thank you, everyone. I'm going to close out now. Just wanted to say big thanks to everyone on the panel today. Really great discussion. I'm looking forward to rejoining the same group in 10 years' time and seeing if anything has come true. Yeah, have a great afternoon, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.